All right, hey, welcome everybody to another episode of Culture Eats Everything as we talk with CEOs. And I'm here with David Snodgrass today, who happens to be the CEO and president of Lake Trust Credit Union. And we are in the beautiful headquarters that you have. So David, tell us a little bit about you, maybe family, where'd you grow up?
Sure.
How'd you get here?
Sure. It's been a journey. So I grew up in Pennsylvania, lived and went to school and worked there pretty much my entire life. Actually joined and worked at a credit union in New Jersey for about 17 years in a number of different capacities there. I was never the CEO.
Okay.
And the opportunity to join Lake Trust emerged 12 years ago as a result of the creation of Lake Trust, which was the product of a series of mergers that created the organization. And it was my first opportunity to become a CEO and join the organization. So it's been a great experience. I highly recommend it.
Yeah?
I do.
Okay. Well, tell us what, like, if this was your opportunity 12 years ago now, so you've been doing it for a while, to become a CEO, is that something you had aspired to? Is it something you were how did that come about for you?
Yeah, I know. No, I don't think there's many children that grow up saying, I want to be a credit union CEO someday. So it was never like this lifelong passion.
Yeah.
But the thing about the credit union industry that really drew me into it is the fact that credit unions, by their very nature and structure, are financial cooperatives, not-for-profit financial cooperatives. So the mission really of our work is more the impact that we're able to have in communities and with individuals. And I tell people all the time here, like I work with a very talented team of executives at this credit union. I would, put them up against management teams of any for-profit, Fortune 500 company. And so the business really requires professionals, and you have this opportunity to exercise your chops at whatever your business acumen is. And so whether you're a lawyer or you're a marketer or human resources or finance, all those disciplines exist in credit unions. So you get to, if that's what you love to do, like I do, you get to exercise those chops and love what you do. But more importantly, you get to love why you do it, because it's an organization that is very intentional around the positive impact we're able to have in the communities that we serve.
Yeah.
And it's not for the enrichment of other stockholders, right? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the real benefit of being in the credit union industry.
Yeah, very cool. I tell people all the time, like I actually worked in church world for a long time, and that feels like even a whole other universe of leadership and things. But the more I work with for-profits and nonprofits, organizations of 50 employees or 1,000 employees, if people are involved, it's all the same stuff. When it comes down to leadership, it's people stuff, and it's difficult at times, and it really is a lot of fun at other times. But it's interesting actually how similar so many of the things are, so many of our organizations and our businesses are. When you first became a CEO, did you feel ready?
No, not at all. And it comes from like a career. I use an orchestra as sort of an analogy.
Okay.
And I'm not an orchestra buff by any stretch of the imagination, but you're a musician and you work at your craft, and hone and try to perfect your craft, the thing that you do, to eventually get into that first chair, right? And you're the star, like you're the key contributor, right? And then leadership opportunities are created, and you're now a conductor rather than playing an instrument. So you don't even play an instrument anymore.
Yeah.
So everything that you've done through your entire career to be the best accountant or the best lawyer or the best whatever, it doesn't really matter anymore. And now you don't even face the audience. Your back is to the audience. And you're now, one responsibility is to help that orchestra create the very best musical performance that they can do, and draw the best out of each of them and create, a wonderful experience. And it has little to do with playing any particular position anymore, right? And so, no, when I became CEO here 12 years ago, I was very honest with everybody, including the board of directors that hired me. Like, I've not done this before. This is going to be, an experiment for all of us to some degree. But I'm really committed to helping the people of the organization perform at their highest level possible.
Yeah.
And if we're able to do that, we'll have a successful organization. And it's not about my accounting degree anymore. It's not about, my MBA. It's really, I tell people all the time, and my kids are, as an example of this, like, you mentioned, like, the commonality in terms of leadership, it's regardless almost of whatever industry you're in. I think the classes and the coursework, in my experience, either as an undergraduate or in my graduate studies, that I rely on and call upon the most were my coursework in psychology and organizational development, because it really is about people.
Yeah.
It's really less about, like, I've got really talented people that are expert in their disciplines. I can't do the jobs that they do.
Right.
I'm not qualified to do the jobs that they do, but if I can help them perform at their highest level, that's what it's about. And really understanding how people work, what motivates them, what's their passion in terms of what makes them perform the best, and how do we deliver that, I think that becomes the role of a leader. You're not playing an instrument anymore.
Yeah. No, I love, that's a great analogy, and especially from a perspective of culture, like, how do I get you all playing in unison, aligned, and performing your best? How do you do that? Like, what are the things, because it's maybe someone would think about, there's a training we could do or this, but like, for 12 years you've been trying to help that continually cultivate. What do you do?
Yeah. That's a really good question. I think it starts with having people that are willing to engage in the journey. I oftentimes say that everything is difficult to the unwilling. Like, if you don't want to do something, chances are you won't, or you won't do it very, very well. And so, I felt like my journey when I first came here was to create a vision of an organization that we were aspiring to become, and encourage and engage the rest of the organization to come along on that journey and want it and be willing to do what it was necessary for that to happen. If you've got them, if the team is willing and passionate and engaged, that's 95% of the battle right there. I think
Sure.
competent people in that capacity are going to step up and deliver.
Yeah.
But it's really creating that sense of where is it we're going, what are we trying to accomplish, and why, and always going back to why we're doing this and what's the impact we're looking to have, and creating measures along the way that help the team recognize that we're actually accomplishing it, or we're winning, or we're making progress. We're far from perfect, but are we progressing? Are others seeing us for what we are, and have confidence and place their trust in us? And again, always just kind of storytelling and encouraging people to be engaged.
Yeah, storytelling, that's an interesting way of saying it, because leadership is about painting that picture of the future, or getting people there. You're trying to generate in your people willingness to grow, to work, to progress. What's the storytelling piece? Like, how's that part of it, or what does that do?
Well, I mean, the storytelling in our case is really the stories of the impact that we've been able to have on individuals or communities or businesses or nonprofits. We start every one of our leadership team meetings, and we meet every week. Every one of our leadership team meetings starts with a story, a member well-being story, as we call them. Like, what happened, who has a story about what we were able to accomplish. Like, one of those stories that answers the question, why are we here doing this in the first place?
Yeah.
And so then our website and a lot of our, I guess you would call it marketing, is really just branded storytelling of other examples of that we tell the marketplace, recognizing that we're not for everybody. But you're committed to having an impact in Michigan, and we're likely to be a financial institution that you would want to do business with.
Yeah. Huh. So telling lots of stories helps. And you said members, which I think is something very unique about the credit union space of the banking space. But you guys are very particular about language. Why is that important?
Well, it is important because the reality, as I mentioned earlier, as a financial cooperative, we're member owned, meaning that there are no external stakeholders that have an interest in our organization. Every one of our customers is a member and a fractional owner of our business, one member, one vote. So it has nothing to do with the amount you have on deposit with us or that sort of thing. It's a very democratic run kind of organization. And so those words matter. And I meet with all of our new employees when they start. Like every other Monday, we have a new class of recruits that come on board, and I meet with them. And oftentimes I'm asked the question about being the CEO here, what's that like? And it's very different than being the CEO of a for-profit company, I imagine. Like, look, what do I know? Like, I've not, this is my one CEO experience. But, there's not this quarterly call with analysts, in New York, demanding answers to, what have you done for me lately? Or why are your profits off this quarter? And who are you going to fire or lay off in order to make the numbers? It's a very different game, and we have that's like a series of sprints in the credit union space, and in Lake Trust in particular, we play a long game. It's like an endurance event. It's more of a marathon, and I don't mean this literally, but rather than we can make decisions not on a quarterly basis, but more on the quarter century basis. Like we can make a decision that we don't expect to have immediate short-term performance implications, or maybe see the result of a decision for maybe a year or two or three or five, and that's okay, because it's a different game we're playing. The strategy is different. Yeah.
And how does that, so there's the strategy is different on the financial performance side of things. How's it different for someone that works here? Like, how do you guys, part of that language is like focused around being different, but there's a culture to what you guys do at the credit union. What do you focus on there, or how is that different?
It's really one and the same. It's really about well-being, and it's, the well-being, the financial well-being of our members and those that do business with us, but likewise our own team as well, and a focus on our teammates, well-being as a whole. And so therefore, I think the difference you can see as being an employee of our organization is that very point I made earlier, the long game. We don't have these peaks and valleys in terms of we grow and then, we have to shrink. And it's very steady, predictable organization from that perspective. And I think our teammates appreciate that stability. But at the same time, it's also an organization that is innovative and growing. And I mentioned, we have, new hires coming on board all the time, which is, in and of itself, an indicator that we're doing something right. We're not, downsizing every other week. And so I think we see a lot of opportunity for prosperity of our own teammates and growth in our organization. And I think being a part of that is, from an employee's perspective, I know it's important to me. It's a big reason why I'm here. Is all that opportunity that we see existing for ourselves.
And that as you work hard, you're taking care of the people who are around you, and that is reciprocates.
It's like like when you're on a flight, right? Like that safety briefing at the beginning of the flight when they like, if a mask, drops, right? And it's sort of like, first put yours on before assisting others. That's sort of like our philosophy here too. It's like, let's take care of each other. Let's do what's right for our team, and then therefore extend that to the members that we work with.
Now you mentioned earlier, like some of the kind of key measures that you guys have to know you're doing what you want to do, and it helps you tell the stories. How do you balance the vision and the mission as a leader and measuring the things? Because sometimes measurements can have a perverse effect where it's like it becomes about just meeting that measure, like it would if you had quarterly meetings with investors to answer to. How do you keep those separate, or I don't know, how do you think of those as different from each other, making sure they're not unnecessarily competing, perhaps?
Yeah. So we use a scorecard the term we use is a balanced scorecard. So it has a representation of all of those sort of measures, right? So it's not entirely financially driven. So we have a scorecard that measures probably 9 or 10 different outcomes that we're looking for, some of which are financial, some of which are sort of the well-being of our membership as a whole, and then there's an internal kind of cultural and employee well-being aspect. So all 3 of those factors are measured on our scorecard, none being more important than the other, but we look at those 3 dimensions at all times.
Okay. And they're kind of, I assume, like, it's not like there's a measure that tells you the well-being, it's like a proxy. But like, what do you, for when you said internal well-being and staff, like how do you guys measure that?
Yeah,
Pay attention to it.
Yeah, so through surveys in many respects. We do a lot of polling and surveying of our teammates to see how they're doing and how they're feeling. Likewise, similarly with our membership as a whole, we work with Gallup. We're one of a few credit unions that actually works with Gallup. Well, Gallup allows us to work with them, I should say. But we use a lot of their tools and their experience from a surveying and polling perspective to really try to understand where our members and where our employees are at and how they're sensing that the organization is meeting their expectations.
Yeah, that's cool. Do you actually, I was going to go back to one of the things that it sounded like was behind you first becoming a CEO, and your success has been you were really honest in a vulnerable way when you first started. Like, I've never done this, but you're committed to it. What are some of the other things, like you seem down to earth, like I don't, and it's not like brag on yourself, but what are some of the things you felt like really have helped you be successful and stay committed to this? Because I'm sure there's been times where you're like, I don't know what I'm doing, or I maybe don't want to do this, or people are frustrating, or all those kind of things. What's helped you grow as a CEO?
I really do think it's just been being kind of true to yourself. And so I came from an organization, no disrespect. I mean, I was at that organization for 17 years. So, I mean, it was not like I didn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
But it was very, very traditional in its leadership style and approach. And I was not the CEO. I worked for the CEO. And I saw a lot of things that, I kind of kept a notebook of things that, like, if I ever happened to be in the position where I was the CEO, things I would do differently or I might want to consider differently. And, all I ever want to, for us to be is a place that I want to work at as well, right? Like it's, and I remember not being a CEO and the things that annoyed me or could have been done better. And I think just being, open and vulnerable and be willing to experiment. Like you mentioned, our headquarters building here is sort of an example. When I first got here, and I was telling the story of who we could become. And the interesting thing, let me back up for a second. There was a merger that created Lake Trust in 2010. And the mantra of the merger was A plus B equals C. Not a bigger A, not a bigger B. So it's 2 equally sized credit unions that came together and formed Lake Trust. And it was that idea of a new organization rather than a larger version of either the 2 pre-existing credit unions is what drew me here in the first place. It was like a startup opportunity with some resources, not like a garage. And so I knew the story. I was, the story was appealing to me. And when I was interviewing with the board of directors for the role, I was really pressing on this C thing. Like, you're serious, right? Like, you really want something that's different than what had been, with all due respect, but what had been in the past. And they were like, yeah. So I'm like, sign me up. And so I came on board, and I started talking about like what we're going to be, this new organization, what we're going to be like. But at the same time, we were still operating out of multiple headquarter locations, and we weren't together. And so for people that were working in Lansing, or people that were working in Plymouth or Detroit, nothing seemed all that different, right? Like it was just words. And then there's this new guy like spouting off all this stuff that what we're going to become. And it was like, anybody could say those things, right?
Sure.
But one of the initial charges I had was to solve for this headquarters issue, because we were disparate locations all over the state. And it, to me, was this rare opportunity to build something that is symbolic of what it is we're going to be as an organization, what C is going to look like. And so we built this headquarters, and some features of the headquarters is that there are no private offices. So no one has an office. I remember when the designers were working with us and said, okay, like, David, like, what do you want your office to look like? I'm like, I don't want an office. I don't need an office. And so there's no private offices. The me space that each of us has as workers here in the organization is nice, but kind of utilitarian, and it gets the job done. But we're able to have some features in our headquarters that are just absolutely amazing that we all get to share. It's not about what me and what I get, it's what we all get to benefit from.
Right.
And so the headquarters truly became sort of the symbol. I remember the day that we moved into the space, it was like people finally got it. Like, we understand now. We see all those words that had been shared, and the vision and the thought sort of manifest in a building, and it's like, you're serious about this. Like, yeah, we're like $30 million serious about this, right? So I think, in my mind, it's really, being part of an organization, being engaged, telling the story, walking the talk, creating symbols that demonstrate your commitment to the why, I think are that's the essence of the work I do.
Yeah, that's awesome. What would you say to someone out there who's a younger leader, maybe does aspire to be a CEO or isn't really sure, but they've got decades ahead of them? What would you say to them, maybe talking to yourself 20 some years ago? What would you encourage them with, or tell them to do more of?
I mean, I look at it from the standpoint of, we really have control of one thing, and that's the amount of investment we make in ourselves from a learning and development perspective.
Yeah.
And people ask me, like, how did this happen for you? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, I really don't. It's sort of the intersection of preparedness and opportunity.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't know that I have control over what opportunities present themselves or would be presented to me or to anybody that's aspiring to be, a CEO. Those chances are those opportunities will be present at some point. But the only thing you can really control is, are you ready?
Yeah.
At that moment when it happens, and are you prepared? And are you doing everything you can be doing in terms of investing in yourself that makes you a ready now candidate for whatever roles open up for you?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. What would maybe you tell them to do less of? Wasting time on social media.
Yeah, that could be
Netflix.
that could be part of it. I don't know. I think less of the politicking and more of investment in demonstrating capabilities, I think are I mean, I've been around, a long time in business, and, I've seen a lot of, relatively empty suits, people that, have gotten to where they are by, maneuvering and
Right.
playing, being
Right.
agile at the game,
Yeah.
as opposed to being really, you know, a solid substance.
Mm.
You know, like they're like marshmallows, like lots of volume and very little substance.
Very yeah, that's good.
And so, I would be less engaged in that
Yeah.
perspective in terms of how to get ahead and really being investing in yourself and proving your worth.
Yeah, that's great. Earn skills. What? Yeah, I guess some of that substance. What else is behind that? There's a competency skill side of that. What else would you say is behind the substance part?
I would say a passion and a commitment for the why.
Mm.
I think that has to be genuine. I tell people all the time that, like, Lake Trust isn't for everybody. Like, if you were wanting to come to an organization where, it's rich on title and stripes, I worked at an organization before coming here where, the VPs in the organization would walk into each other's office and count the ceiling tiles on the ceiling in order to estimate the square footage of the office, and then complain about why somebody else's office was 10 square feet larger than mine. Like that, those kinds of things, are just
not much of a mission worth spending your life for.
A total waste of time. So, like, if you can find, like, again, here at Lake Trust, it's like we've got we're not the largest financial institution by any stretch of the imagination, but I wouldn't call us small either. I'd call us miniaturized, if that makes sense. Meaning we've got all the same complexities of Bank of America or a large institution, just on a smaller scale. And while it's not for everybody, if you really want to win at the game of business and have an impact, a positive impact on the well-being of the communities in which we live, work, and play, then it's a great place for you. If that's your mission behind why you want to pour so much of your energy into a job, then it's the right place for you. But if it's really about making money or stripes on your sleeve or size of my office or all of that sort of thing, you would be miserable here, and you'd probably be ridiculed right out the door.
Yeah. Well, I love the counting the ceiling tiles. Like, it's just a sad proxy for something that doesn't really matter.
No.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. Exactly right.
Well, what would you say, just kind of in closing, what maybe a book that you would recommend others to read because it's helped you or impacted you?
Yeah, I have one answer to this, and it's an old book, and but I think it's had a profound impact on me, and that is the book by Jim Collins, Good to Great.
Yeah.
It's kind of a classic book, and but some of the lessons learned in that book have really had an impact on me. Starting with good is the enemy of great, meaning, like, once you feel like you've arrived or it's good enough, you're immediately on the decline. Like, it's you can't ever let up. You have to continue to pursue greatness at all times. And so that's been a big book that has impacted me. Sort of the whole level 5 leadership in that book, and sort of the transformation stories of the companies that managed to move from good to great. He in a supplement to the book after the fact, he made an analogy about these companies that transform, and to the outside world, it looks like something happened and there was this inflection point in the pivot and greatness occurred. But in reality, it's more like an egg. And like, you could have a fertilized chicken egg sitting there, and from the outside, nothing is changing, right? And all of a sudden, the shell cracks and emerges a chick.
Yeah.
And it's like, that was the transformation moment, but there was a lot going on inside that egg for a long time that no one else sees. And those companies that have moved from good to great, are focused internally on becoming great, not necessarily concerned about what the rest of the world thinks of them, and emerge as something that looks like this remarkable transformation when it's been a decade-long
effort.
Of consistent
Mhm.
progress. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
good. It's funny, I literally thought of the flywheel
Mm-hmm.
principle earlier when you were mentioning you guys are more of a marathon, not quarterly sprints. You're
Mhm.
playing this long thing. It's heavy at times, it's slow, but
Mhm.
you just keep pushing and let it pick up
Right.
its own speed from
Yeah,
there.
I mean, eventually momentum helps you, right? And that's, again, if you were to ask me like where I think we are right now, we're still shouldering that flywheel. Some days it's heavier than others, but um, when you have the storytelling and the scorecard that gives the team some indication that we're being successful,
Yeah.
um, then the organization continues to be committed to pushing that wheel.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, that's a good reminder too. Obviously, if someone's never read Good to Great, they should read it. But probably for many of us, is reread it.
Mhm.
Like, I remember the flywheel.
Mm-hmm.
I'm due for a reread on it. But all right, well, David, thank you so much for taking time to chat. We hope this was helpful to many of you out there, emerging, aspiring leaders of organizations, future CEOs, but especially all of you school superintendents and CEOs leading organizations. It's a constant work, and we're grateful to get the chance to be part of it. So thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right.